know, and the few faces here that I don't know. I think you're in for a treat tonight. We are very excited to present this lecture by Dr. Nadya Foty-Oneschuk, who some of you might have known when she was a little girl running around this museum. She's been a wonderful source of inspiration and advice and resources and energy for all of us here at the Ukrainian Museum of Canada since we began on the museum's new journey. For those of you who aren't aware of that, most of you are, we're a brand new team. We've been here for just over a year and a bit at the museum, and we are the luckiest people in the world to be working here. The Ukrainian Museum of Canada was initiated in 1936 by the Ukrainian Women's Association of Canada and came to this building in 1980, opened its doors in 1980. I was just in Detroit, Michigan, attending the Consortium of Ukrainian Heritage Organizations of North America. I may have got that slightly wrong. And it was the first time that a large group of Canadians went. I gathered colleagues from Toronto and Winnipeg and other places in Canada to come with me, and we got presentations on people's facilities, and there was a huge amount of knowledge and interesting information at the table. But I can tell you that nobody but the Ukrainian Museum in New York has the facility we do, and the presentations that we did about this museum and Osararok did in Winnipeg really excited the American audiences, because the kinds of programming that we're doing is not what they're seeing in the US right now. So I was inspired by that, and I'm hoping to bring that whole crew, the whole consortium here for the next meeting in 2025. But just to say that this is, that experience drove home for me even more the value of this museum and the importance of maintaining it and building it and growing it. And it's thanks to people like you who come out to our events and who support us in so many different ways that we are doing that. And thanks to Nadya as well. We've collaborated with the Prairie Center for the Study of Ukrainian Heritage, where Nadya is interim director, on several projects this year so far, and we have more plans in the works. And collaborating with Nadya is always a delight. She is a wealth of knowledge. Her background is in Ukrainian folklore, and she teaches Ukrainian language and Ukrainian Canadian history and anthropology at the university. And she's a favorite. She's beloved by students, and we have some students here, former students, and beloved of all of us here at the museum. So thank you for coming to this. See, this is what to this talk, and the title is Beliefs in Being, the Role of Nature in the Formation of Traditional Ukrainian Perspective. And this, I will say before Nadya speaks, is something that's very interesting to many of us here working at the museum, and I think that we see around the world right now with the Ukrainian resistance, the fight for Ukraine right now, that there is a revival in the Ukrainian diaspora of interest in kind of Ukrainian ritual, and there's some interesting politics around it too, which Nadya will maybe have time to touch on. But for now, I'm going to hand the mic over to Nadya, and she's going to be using the mic tonight because we are recording this, hopefully to broadcast later on our YouTube channel. If you don't know, we have a YouTube channel, so you can see some of our stuff there. Thank you so much.
And thank you to all of you for coming this evening, for your interest and maybe curiosity. I have to say, anytime I can speak about something like this in the realm of Ukrainian culture, beyond the confines of my classroom, I get very excited. But I have to be completely honest in saying that this was a bit of a daunting task as well. I think, especially perhaps in the diaspora communities, and I can speak most specifically about the Ukrainian Canadian community, talking about these sorts of topics in distant Ukrainian history kind of realm has been quite polarizing for the most part. There are those that are very interested in learning about all parts of Ukrainian history, even those, gasp, pre-Christian parts. And there are those that really think that that's crossing the line and we need to look forward, not look backward. So I hope that a presentation like this might be able to kind of bridge the gap a little bit, because we do have a wonderful middle ground where these things coexist actually quite peacefully. We just maybe don't even realize it or don't know it. So I hope that's what we can accomplish by the end of tonight's lecture. As always, for those students of mine that are in the crowd, I tend to be long-winded. I will try to really not be this evening, which is why I've started with a skeleton for myself. I'm a big lover of skeletons. I try to teach my students to make skeletons. These are the types of kind of subsections that I hope to cover tonight. You will see that I have to talk, we're talking about the formation of this worldview that has extended since millennia ago. So we do need to talk about prehistory and a little bit about how things formed over the kind of early period, though I will really try to keep those bits short, and I will focus my discussion on the mythology that came from those belief systems and how remnants of that mythology really kind of blended with the continuing worldview that developed and even exists today, believe it or not. Hopefully at the end, I will have time to talk about the revival of these types of movements and a little tiny bit at the end about remnants that we can see or renewed interest that we can see in various forms of popular culture. This is a big plate, but I hope to get through most of it. So, just because I don't assume that everyone comes here this evening with the same background and the same understanding of some of these really complicated high-level concepts, let's talk a little bit about belief. We're here to study these ancient belief systems and see how they've been traced throughout Ukrainian history. Certainly, belief in a very plain sense is the things that we believe in and also the act of believing. Belief can be customary. So for instance, it is meant to produce a certain outcome. Ukrainians, I think the world over, strongly believe that garlic will cure all illness. Yes? I think you agree. Belief can be religious or spiritual or even supernatural. And I invite you to kind of step away from any hesitation with words like supernatural or magical or, God forbid, pagan. Tonight, just so that we can kind of get through the historical parts of this presentation. So yes, it can be religious, spiritual, supernatural, i.e. Ukrainian Christians believe that communion is the body and blood of Christ, or that on Christmas Eve, Sviat Večer, our ancestors come and celebrate with us. Belief can be expressed through the observation and interaction with our particular communities. This is how ritual and ritual activity have come to be. It is the outward expression of inward belief. And finally, belief can be the ideas or principles that matter most to us. We believe very strongly to this day that no one should be celebrating a holiday by themselves, otherwise known as Ukrainian hospitality, right? No one should be on their own. Everyone should always have someone to be with. So, how is belief expressed? Certainly through oral texts. We have prayers, we have proverbs, we have incantations. Those are ways in which we are expressing that inward belief. Certainly through behaviors. We make the sign of the cross with special blessed candles that are brought home from church during Holy Week. We use these to mark and protect our doorways and our windows. Certainly through objects. The most sacred object of the winter holiday season in our tradition is the diduch, the sheaf of wheat. This is meant to be the ultimate symbol of the ancestors, and we place it in a special corner, and we are expressing that belief in all the generations of the clan coming together for this special holiday season. Intangible beliefs are expressed through rituals and ritual performance. We're taking that intangible and making it tangible and visible. And that is really kind of our starting point in understanding how and why we do the things that we do. Now, we can't talk about belief without talking about folklore, because folklore is one of the ways in which our people express belief. It's certainly a core part of folklore, and it is what makes the tradition or the custom or the ritual relevant. If someone doesn't believe in what they're doing, that thing ceases to be relevant, and likely it won't continue to exist. So belief is actually a really important component of folklore existing from generation to generation. If something is irrelevant, sometimes it'll get changed or altered, or other times it'll just completely cease to exist. Now, as a folklorist, believe me, I have a lot of experience in seeing reactions to the word folklore. There is the assumption that folklore is somehow the discussion of things unsophisticated or primitive or simple or old-fashioned. But ladies and gentlemen, the fact of the matter is, these are the ways in which the world was understood by generations that came before us, and these are the ways in which they expressed those beliefs. So they turn out to be actually a very interesting source of information for us. Beginning in prehistoric Ukraine, and I'm going to be making huge leaps and bounds from era to era for the sake of time, so bear with me. Prehistoric religion, if we're looking at belief systems primarily in this discussion, prehistoric religion gives us a fabulous starting point for tracing this evolution of primitive elements of belief through the stages of Ukrainian civilization. Some of the oldest relics that exist provide us information about these earliest religious beliefs, and they actually extend back to the Paleolithic age, if you can believe it, 3.3 million years ago. Discovery sites of Neanderthal mammoth hunters near Mizin, which is in the Chernihiv Oblast, and Balamutivka in the Chernivtsi Oblast, give us all sorts of evidence of what these early people believed in. Female figurines representative of the mother goddess or Mother Earth, statuettes of birds and animals, cave drawings depicting various hunting rituals and that sort of relationship with the animal world. The photo that you see here are the famous Kamienny Baby. These are prehistoric statues that are located near Izyum in the Kharkiv Oblast. Some of you may recognize that name because this was one of the places that was occupied very soon after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and unfortunately, many of these statues were actually destroyed by the incoming Russian forces. These statues were meant to commemorate the ancestors. They are both female and male forms, and they were meant to look out and protect the inhabitants of the land. Now, Ukrainians are world famous for their talents in agriculture, and certainly when we talk about belief systems and that connection to nature, we cannot ignore the fact that it is because they worked the land and had this sacred relationship with the land. We're jumping forward to the 5th millennium BC now, and the Kukuteni Tripilyan culture, often just simply called Tripilya. If this is the western coast of the Black Sea, you can see this purple area here where the Tripilyan civilization was known to settle is most parts of western and central Ukraine. Now, the Tripilci are just a fascinating point of discovery about kind of the origins, the beginnings of Ukrainian worldview, because, first of all, they were known to be agriculturalists and they practiced animal husbandry. Beyond that, they were sophisticated in so many other ways. They had two-story dwellings in city settlement formations, which seems absolutely bonkers for that time period. Most Ukrainians know the word tripilya thanks to their highly developed culture around pottery. Ukrainian museums throughout the world have likely had exhibits dedicated to tripilyan pottery, its unique design, etc. They are also believed to be the first to have domesticated the horse, which is obviously a very important achievement. And students usually love this the most. They were a matriarchal civilization, so that means the most important spiritual and administrative leaders were women. There are remnants of that actually throughout Ukrainian culture as well, but that's for another day. In terms of their belief system, there is evidence of a very advanced belief system among Tripilyans. We see from various digs that have been done clay figurines and objects containing carvings of zoomorphic and anthropomorphic images and symbols. We see both male figures pictured with sun symbols, assumably in reverence to the sun god, and also female figures with pictures of vegetation symbols in reverence to the mother goddess, Mother Earth. This divine couple is often pictured together holding hands as equals. Where have we seen that before in Ukrainian ritual performance? In a Ukrainian wedding. Nobody is given away in a Ukrainian wedding, right? The bride and groom walk in together as equals. We see little bits and pieces of these components of the belief system throughout time. Jumping forward a whole bunch once again, let's talk about those ancient Ukrainians, the Slavs. The Slavs were actually a blend of tribes who spoke Indo-European languages coming from the east, and they settled in the forests north of what is called the Pontic Steppe. So we're talking kind of central and northern parts of present-day Ukraine. And they began to settle there beginning in the 1st century. Kiev, what was to become Kiev, was their kind of easternmost outpost. Now they too were quite sophisticated for the time. They lived in log houses that were organized into villages of about 30 to 40 homes. And these villages were grouped into clusters that had administrative and military fortifications in the middle of each. They too were very adept at agriculture and animal husbandry, surprise, surprise. I had one student tell me today it's in the DNA, it's in the genes. Maybe so. In terms of their belief system, they were polytheistic, meaning they believed in many gods and goddesses connected to nature. And they, in terms of state building, desired a strong alliance with the most powerful neighbor in the area, which was the Byzantine Empire. And that really laid the roots for the Rurik dynasty, the ruling family that came to form and rule over the medieval state of Kiev and Rus quite significantly. Eventually, though these were Varangians that came down from Scandinavian areas, they became Slavicized. So they adopted, with Volodymyr's father, adopted Slavic names and really kind of assimilated themselves into the local culture of the Slavs in terms of language, culture, belief systems, etc. Now, Volodymyr is perhaps the best well-known of all of the Kievan rulers, simply because he did something really big. And we're going to be talking about that shortly. He ruled from 980 until 1015, and as a ruler, he was mostly focused internally. So he focused on the welfare of his people and on securing its borders. At the time, Kievan Rus was kind of being attacked by various nomadic tribes from every direction, and he wanted not only to grow his state, but to keep it safe. He also had great aspirations to develop trade with the West, but he knew to do that he needed strong alliances that were closer to home. Now, during his time, Kievan Rus became the largest state in Europe. We're talking about 800,000 square kilometers, with a population of up to 12 million. That is a pretty notable achievement for that period of time. Now, in terms of belief system, prior to Volodymyr kind of ascending the throne, his people believed in, they were polytheistic, believed in many gods and goddesses tied to nature. Everyone kind of did their own thing, and there was really no formalized approach to spirituality, etc., for his state. So he started thinking strategically and thought, well, I need to formalize something. There needs to be some sort of formal version of what people believe in. That will give me power, that will give me legitimacy. This will be a good thing for state building. So in 980, I believe, right when he assumed power, he created the Slavic pantheon of gods and goddesses, and he intended to use this pantheon to standardize the existing belief system among his subjects. Now, he did many other things, but first let's talk about the mythology of Kievan Rus, thanks to Volodymyr. It actually, studying this part really shows us that this was an advanced polytheistic religion. The ultimate deity was Svarog. Svarog was the sky father. He was a universal creator and a source of all life. Then there was Perun, perhaps best well known. This was the stern god of thunder and lightning, not unlike Thor. Possibly there is a connection to the fact that Kievan Rus was militarily very strong, and a connection to that military strength and military class through Perun. And because he was so beloved, he eventually became the main deity in the Slavic pantheon. Then there were the solar deities, those connected with the sun. The power of the sun and all that that symbolized was a very important thing for people who were agriculturalists, obviously. So we have Horus and Dashboch. Dashboch, his name essentially means giving god, and he was believed to also be the god of wealth and abundance. If there's plenty of sunshine, wealth and abundance will follow. Then we have Streboch, the grandfather of the winds. Now, agricultural people, let's fast forward to the present day. Farmers, weather is a big deal, yes? We rely on good weather so that all things can go as they should. So it comes as no surprise that there would have been a deity that is representative of weather and of wind in particular. Now, likely there would have been a lot of ritual performed to appease Streboch, because he was seen as having the capability to be destructive as well, right? And that would have been disastrous for anyone's farming operation and therefore their livelihood. So, though he wasn't the main deity, he was absolutely an important one. Then we have Semargel. He's the least known of the pantheon. He was believed to be half bird and half dog, so we have this connection to the animal and bird world. And his job was to spread the seeds of life over the earth. So again, we have these themes of nature running throughout. My favorite, the only chick in the bunch, Mokosh. She was the ultimate goddess of fertility, Mother Earth, the one responsible for procreation of all living species on Earth. And finally, we have Velis, the god of cattle and of all earthly flocks, also the god of the underworld. His sacred animal became the goat, which is why we see goat horns on his head, and likely why he was, pun intended, demonized and kind of became a negative character after the adoption of Christianity. And he is a male version of our fertility deity. Now, these were the things that existed when Volodymyr assumed the throne. He formalized them all, but then his strategy kind of began to shift and he needed to correct course. The most important problem that he had, the biggest problem that he had, was that he needed to make a plan to marry, and he needed to do so strategically. mostly because the southern flank of the state was very unprotected, constantly being bombarded by these nomadic tribes and attacked, and he needed to deal with that problem. Well, Byzantium was a really great ally to have that would help protect that southern end of the state. But the Byzantines didn't have a great impression of Volodymyr. They wrote him off as a pagan barbarian. They really didn't take him very seriously. So he began to think of how he can rectify this relationship with Byzantium, how he can essentially marry into the family so that he has this alliance, he has this support, and whatever steps would lead him to that ultimate end result were worth it, even if they were drastic. So very soon he made it clear to the Byzantines that he wanted to marry their daughter, the emperor's daughter, Anna, and that in order to do so, he will convert to Christianity, which was kind of the deal breaker. If he didn't convert, the marriage was off. So he himself converted to Christianity. This wasn't a completely foreign concept to him because his grandmother, Knyazhnya Olha, had also converted to Christianity. She was a great mentor to him, she helped raise him, and so this was seen as not a very big deal. Afterwards he came to Kyiv, and as a mark of his commitment to his in-laws, he moved to remove all of the Rus idols of gods and goddesses completely. And there's a legend of the idol of Perun, the most beloved of the Slavic pantheon, which stood on the banks of the Dnipro River in what is now downtown Kyiv, actually, as the legend goes, standing right where Volodymyr's statue stands today, and he had the idol banished into the river Dnipro, where it washed away and washed all the paganism out of the country, and as such, opened his arms to Christianity and the Christian tradition and this wonderfully strategic, beautiful alliance with the Byzantines. He married, he did all of those things to make it conducive to creating this alliance and to accepting this new religion, and as such, he decided to take it one step further and accept Christianity as the new state religion for Kyiv and Rus. This was a necessary reform that needed to be done. The whole Slavic pantheon was okay, but his strategy and his desires for state building were more important. And so, as we famously know, in 988, he accepted Christianity, the Byzantine version of it, as the state religion for the people. And as we are taught, one day, on Saturday, everybody was a heathen pagan, and on Sunday, everybody was a devout Christian, and everyone was happy, and it all went swimmingly. We are taught that the Kyiv population came down to the river Dnipro and were baptized by Byzantine bishops and priests, and everyone was happy to do so. Sure, that makes for a great story, but in reality, things were quite different. The conversion happened very slowly. It first happened at the upper levels of society and then filtered down to the peasantry, and likewise, it began in Kyiv and then eventually spread out to the outer periphery of the Kyivan state. And, you know, legend has it that it happened very easily and that everyone was accepting of it, but that's actually not really a factual truth of any sort. It was not a welcome change. They were being told to, everything that you've believed for generations upon generations is now done. You're going to believe different things in a different way, according to a different schedule, and you're going to be okay with it. Well, you can imagine how that went. It didn't. So the whole process of adopting Christianity was actually very slow. It was not something that happened overnight. And it had very real, lasting cultural implications. What ended up happening is a kind of, it was intended as a transitional period, but ended up kind of never fully going away, is this system of dvovirya, a religious dualism. So the people in power in the Kievan state knew enough that, okay, this is not going as we had hoped. This is going to take a longer time for people to buy into. So we'll layer a Christian layer of meanings over top of what the population already believes. All of that stuff with nature and gods and goddesses. And again, this was meant to be a transitional thing that was not supposed to last for very long, but it never fully went away, and it just really got absorbed into how people saw the world and how they understood the world around them. This really unique syncretism was the result. And we still see this in many of the life and calendar cycle rituals that are practiced today. So, nature. How does nature come into this once again, now that everyone has been converted to Christianity? Well, nature worship was very richly preserved through various forms of folklore, not surprisingly. And we see a lot of animism, the ascribing of human characteristics to the world around them, to trees, to animals, etc. The preservation of these beliefs in nature in this post-Christianized space really spoke to the deeply held beliefs that existed prior to this state reform, and most specifically to this connection to the land through agricultural practices. Now, the church incorporated kind of many customs and rites along the way. Sometimes they just named this particular god and goddess the name of a saint, and they really tried to not change very much. But other times they really condemned those beliefs and practices. And I think the condemnation was intended to make it go away and to stop being a real thing for the population. But most times it just made things very quiet, and people continued to practice in their own way, even if that's not what the state wanted them to do. And we see that this stayed, this syncretism between pre-Christian and Christian belief systems stayed for centuries, for millennia, up until when in the mid-1800s we first start seeing Ukrainian ethnographers go out into the countryside and talk to people about what they believe and how they believe, and we start seeing evidence of these remnants of these age-old belief systems. Now, when we talk about nature, we talk about certain categories. The most important among them is Mother Earth, Matinka Zemlya. She was half of that divine couple, right? There's a saying that says, Tato Vysoki, a mama shiroka. The father is tall, meaning the sky, and the mother is wide, meaning the earth. She was the most sacred, the source of all life and all food. And she was very often personified. So the earth as a human body, where the rivers and streams are veins and arteries carrying her blood, which is the water. So we see these core elements of nature being used in this reverence to Mother Earth. Plants. Those of you that have maybe attended one of the Kupala celebrations here at the museum have heard information about plants and their importance in various points of the year tied to belief. Plant life was highly animated and personified. It was believed to be sacred. It was life-giving and had healing properties. Herbs were used in all sorts of ways. They helped protect people and animals from evil, and they were very powerful in that way, believed to be very powerful in that way. Common ones that we see throughout Ukrainian ritual are things like poppy seed, lovage, wormwood, willow. And that reverence of the plant world extended to trees. They commanded a great amount of respect, likely because they were probably venerated in connection to one god or another. The most sacred of them was the oak, the dub, due to its association with Perun. This was a strong tree, and Perun was the personification of ultimate strength. Those of you that work in the museum space know that the tree of life is everywhere in decorative appearances of Ukrainian culture. Certainly, this symbol is prevalent in embroidery, in weaving. We see similar symbols of plant life on pisanki, which are the most ancient of all Ukrainian folk arts. This stuff is everywhere. Sometimes it takes a little bit to train your eye to be able to identify it and to see it and recognize it, but it's there. Animals and birds. There is a ton of information about sacred animals and birds. I've just selected a handful here for you. The horse. The horse has always been connected to solar deities. Ancient Ukrainians believed that as the sun moves across the sky, it is actually a sun chariot that is being pulled by a horse. That's how they understood the passage of time. And as such, the horse was really revered and was traditionally not used for any hard labor and farming, etc. That was reserved for the oxen. The horse was kept for transportation and for battle. So this was a kind of an elevated position as these things go. For those of you that are familiar with the Ukrainian New Year tradition, the Malanka goat is a significant component of the entire celebration. The goat was a sacred animal of the sun god and a symbol of fertility. As the old year dies, the new year is born. The bear. In certain regions of Ukraine, the bear would be referred to as dyadko or vuyko, the terms for uncle in Ukrainian. This was an animal that ancient Ukrainians felt a lot of kinship with. And in fact, there is a wedding ritual where the mother of the groom comes out to greet and bless her son prior to the marriage ceremony, and she comes out wearing a bear coat with fur to the outside, personifying this sacred animal in this most special ritual in the life of her son. Birds too, oh my gosh. The amount of information tied to the belief of birds that is evident in Ukrainian folk songs is plentiful. Larry, you will probably agree with me. Storks, the leleka. To this day, if a stork builds a nest on your home, that is considered the ultimate good omen. These were believed to be magical birds. The swallow, the lastivka, excellent name for a choir. They were the heralds of spring. They were the first creatures to show signs of life after the long, harsh winter. And the humble cuckoo, the zuzulka. This was a bird that was believed to see the future. So you have many examples of folk songs where someone is singing to a cuckoo, begging them to tell them what is to come for me, what does my future look like. Now, a talk about the belief system and the worldview of Ukrainians over time really needs to include a little bit about the minor divinities. These are also spirits tied to nature. They're lesser, they're more unsophisticated perhaps, but equally as interesting. And they're separated into three categories directly tied to nature. The first are the field divinities. These are the spirits that lived in the fields and meadows. They had the ever important job of caring for the crops, and as such, they ensured that there was adequate rain and shine, that they were protected, the crops, from storms and from evil spirits. And as such, they kind of were a guide to one's moral compass, because people were afraid to go into the field and not be quite diligent. If you showed any sign of laziness, you ran the risk of angering those field spirits. So these creations really did kind of serve a moral purpose as well. The most well-known field spirits were the Polyvik, the Poludnitsya, and then the Zhitny Did and Zhitna Baba. Zhitl is the word for rye in Ukrainian, so directly tied to a common crop grown in Ukraine. Then we have the forest divinities. These are those that lived in the forest, they cared for the trees and animals, so again, very much a nod to that sacred relationship with the animal world. Now they too could be a guide for one's moral compass, because you really did not want to anger those forest spirits by wandering in the woods by yourself at night doing things that perhaps you shouldn't be doing on your own. And these were used very much as kind of cautionary tales to keep people in line and to kind of maintain some sort of protection and consistency in society. The most well-known here are the Yesovik, the Cherished, which was mainly divinity common to the Carpathian Mountains, and of course, Mavka, the forest nymph. And finally, we have the water divinities. These are those that lived in the rivers and streams and lakes. Who wouldn't want this? They could help drive fish to a fisherman's net. They also could help guide boats through inclement weather. But they too had a nasty side to them. And if you wandered too close to the water at night, you ran the risk of angering those water spirits, or perhaps if you were a young man, and tended to be young men that tried this, they would become enchanted by those rusalke that would lure them to the water, and it wouldn't end well, let's just say that. Common ones here are the vodyanek and of course the rusalka, which was particularly dangerous to young men. This was a way to keep those young men in line. Of highest importance here is the role of the ancestors. This reverence and this sacred bond with those of our family that have left Earth and reside in the next world extends back at least 2 trillion times, perhaps even farther. These were the protectors of the home and the family. There are many ways in which early Ukrainians paid homage to their ancestors throughout the calendar year and even in their daily life, but these were the ultimate protectors, those that looked out, watched out for you on a daily basis and kept you safe. The divinities connected to this concept of ancestors are Rid and Originated. Rid meaning clan and Originated, the birth giver. Once again, we have this divine couple, the pair of male and female deities, in this instance, believed to represent those ancestors. So what are some remnants of these beliefs in our currently practiced calendar cycle rituals? There are many to choose from. That's probably an understatement. I could probably teach a full semester of what these remnants are in various facets of ritual life for Ukrainians. But I've chosen a few that will hopefully resonate with those of you gathered here tonight. Sviat Večer, Christmas Eve, is a time where a lot of those remnants are present. We have, of course, the ritual meal consists of 12 meatless and dairy-free dishes. And in Sunday school, I was taught that those 12 dishes represented the 12 apostles. But what might have been an earlier origin point for the number 12? Cycles of the moon. Meat and dairy free, why? Well, because it's Advent, Lent, right? But also, in earlier times, this was paying tribute to the animal world that was so revered and so beloved by humankind. The Diduch and Kutya are considered to be central and probably most important elements of how the Christmas Eve celebration is practiced. The Diduch, once again, is that ever important sheaf of wheat. It is collected of the finest wheat at the end of harvest. It is kept safe for Christmas Eve, and then it is placed in the corner of honor under the icon as a physical reminder of those ancestors that are no longer with us. It is believed that all of those kernels of wheat in the sheaf are representative of all those ancestors that are not with us in body, but that are with us in spirit that night. Clear continuation of this reverence for ancestors. The Kutya too, anytime you include wheat, you kind of include the ancestors, is the trend that we're seeing. Kutya, the sacred dish, the most important dish of the Christmas Eve meal, traditionally made up of 3 ingredients: honey, poppy seed, wheat. Again, it is believed for as many kernels of wheat that you have in your bowl, those are all the ancestors that are coming to celebrate this most important holiday with you. Beyond that, kutia was seen as the dish of the ancestors. It has ancient roots. It was prepared in the times of Tripilya, and the only other time of year in which we prepare a similar dish, it's essentially the same thing but goes by a different name, kolovo, is for one's funeral. So we have this clear, direct connection with ancestors and the various generations of a family, living on earth or living beyond. Perhaps my favorite remnant is one from Verbna Nadya, Pussy Willow Sunday or Palm Sunday. Now, I was told as a kid in Sunday school that we use pussy willows because there were no palms in Ukraine, so this was a practical reason, right? Pussy willows were what people had around. And there's this lovely ritual that people of all ages still practice today, where the pussy willows are brought into church, they're blessed by the priest, and then after church, everyone takes turns tapping each other on the shoulder with their pussy willow, reciting a lovely little verse about how Easter comes in a week, and it's not me tapping you, it's the pussy willow. Early Ukrainians revered the willow, as you saw on the plant slide, because this was believed to be the most magical of all trees. It was the first one to show signs of life after a harsh, cold winter. And as such, it always took a place of prominence in the spring, when the warmth and life would return to the earth. So it is absolutely no coincidence that we use it on this particular day at a time where we are bestowing those feelings of new life, new beginnings, fresh starts on our loved ones by tapping on their shoulders with a willow branch. Velichting in and of itself, the Easter celebration, has many aspects, but most prominent among them is the role of pisanki. Our own museum here has put up a lovely exhibit about various pisanka motifs just earlier this year. Whatever you may or may not know about pisanki, they are the ultimate ancient symbol, the egg, the symbol of life, of new life. And the motifs written on the pisanka are almost all connected to nature in one way or another and are ancient symbols. So this very much was not a creation of 988 in Ukraine. This predated that significantly. And finally, Zeleny Sviata, or Green Holidays, or Pentecost. 50 days after Easter, this is a time where we venerate nature very explicitly. And nature is brought from the outside in. So homes and even churches on the interior are decorated with greenery of all sorts. This is also the time when church parishes do grave visitations, or provode. It is not a coincidence here that at this point of the seasonal cycle, we are honoring nature as it's kind of reaching its apex in lushness, and we are also honoring ancestors once again. There's this direct connection to honoring those that came before you. Again, there are many, many others, but hopefully you maybe have even celebrated some of these yourselves. I have time? Okay. A little bit about the modern revival of some of these age-old belief systems. This steers our conversation into the direction of what are called neo-pagans and their connection or their kind of reliance on Ukrainian nationalism. This is a summary of research that was conducted by my colleague, Dr. Maria Lesiev, a folklorist at Memorial University, who has studied these movements both in North America and in Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is not unique to this series of movements. There are pagan movements connected to cultures all around the world. They all are looking to selectively revive various pre-Christian traditions as a way to meet a variety of their everyday needs. They also all have a deep concern for the natural world, and as such, they are often closely connected with environmental movements. Now, sometimes their activity is a result or a reaction to dissatisfaction with whichever monotheistic religion they were a part of previously. So, as Dr. Lesyuv had discovered, many of the members of these modern neo-pagan movements in Ukraine and in North America were disgruntled former Christians that were looking for some other path to spiritual enlightenment. Now, a big draw for individuals to become part of this movement is that there is a significant interest in and allowance for the feminine perspective. They attribute this to the origins of matriarchy and that they're going back to their roots. And as such, they allow some of those leadership positions in their movements to be available to women as equally as to men. And for many, this is a big deal. Now, the context from which all of these movements seem to kind of be revived seems to be socio-political turmoil of some kind or another. So the revival or the creation of this movement in North America came out of the post-World War II context in the diaspora, so in Canada and in North America. And many will say, well, I've never heard of that here. Well, they keep it quiet for a reason. Also in Ukraine, of course, during the Soviet period, none of these things were allowed. So really, in the immediate post-Soviet space, there was just a huge increase in interest in these neo-pagan movements, and a huge increase in their activity and kind of formation. What all of this does and points to is this search for some sort of alternative path to national identity and search for how do we create this nation. We've come out of this traumatic context. How do we go forward by honoring where we came from and finding a way that feels right? All of these neo-pagan movements are really deeply concerned with being true to the primordial past, that past that is untainted before any sort of religious or political ideologies came into being. That is their goal, to reach that primordial past. They, through their ritual practices, show a reverence or a return to the reverence of fire and water, the earth, and the sun. And many of their practices, I've just included 2 photos there. You can see these associations very clearly. Now, they also include, interestingly, a reverence to Ukrainian national heroes. So you will see these neo-pagan movements honoring Dazhbog, the sun god, in the same breath as Taras Shevchenko or Ivan Franko, 2 important literary figures. Grigory Skovoroda, an early Ukrainian philosopher, or even Hetman Bogdan Khmelnytsky, who was one of the key Cossack leaders of the 17th century. That all jives for them. That makes good sense. Their goal is territorial ethnicity, so really connecting themselves to the land and having that be an expression of who they are in terms of ethnic identity. As such, they're very strongly tied to nationalism, and they really try to resist any foreign political or sometimes religious oppression. What really kind of served as fodder for them here was the connection of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Ukraine to any sort of Moscow patriarchate. In years previous, they saw that as an attempt to, once again, oppress people through organized religion. So they use those kinds of things to their advantage. Now, they are mostly considered to be a fringe element. They're under the umbrella of neo-pagan movements, are very far-right versions of this that are openly anti-Semitic, etc. But they actually garner very little influence and are not taken very seriously even by the media. It is what it is. but this interest in reviving some of these aspects very selectively, in a very curated way, is certainly there. Finally, in popular culture, we've seen just a huge surge in interest in some of these themes, most notably since February of 2022. The context is once again a new kind of social turmoil, yes? The war, environmental aspects such as the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, these are all things that people can connect with and that can find some sort of pain through to try to move forward to some sort of belief system that brings them comfort. There is, in general, and this is mostly among younger generations, if I'm being completely honest, to connect to something that is purely Ukrainian. This is done in reaction to all of the Russian propaganda saying there's no such thing as a Ukrainian culture, this is fake, you're all just wayward Russians, etc., etc. They want something that is completely untainted, un-Russified, un-Sovietized, and they see these types of ancient belief systems as being a potential source for that. They also have a great desire to reclaim aspects of a distinctly Ukrainian culture that was outlawed by church and state. Remember, church and state at one point were very closely aligned, and they really want to fight against that. And again, the issues with the Moscow Patriarchate certainly play a role in this. But they are looking for this pure, quote-unquote, authentic Ukrainian culture, and they're looking this far back in many cases. One of the most beautiful explorations in this direction, ironically, is this animated film called Mavka, The Forest Song. Has anyone here heard of it or seen it?
Yes.
Yes. Though it's an animated film, and by the way, on par with Disney, so if you have a little person in your life, absolutely, I would show them this film. I encourage you all to see it because it is one of the first times in modern post-Soviet Ukraine that we have a very high quality product that touches on aspects of these age-old belief systems of Ukrainians. And it is the story of Mavka, a forest nymph, who falls in love with a human being, and how the ways in which the human world and the natural world are so deeply connected and can find a place of harmony and a place of connection. This film is available on Apple TV to rent or to buy. And I really do encourage you to watch it. You'll see many of the characters that I've talked about tonight in the film, and they're wonderfully colorful and funny, and the music is great, and it's just, from the film perspective alone, a wonderful achievement for modern Ukraine in the midst of a terrible war. Also, in popular music, we see themes of these age-old belief systems surfacing through interest in Kupalo, for instance, the Midsummer Festival. That has become very trendy. New music released about Kupalo that harkens back to some of the ritual songs connected to this celebration. An interest in Mother Earth, oftentimes Mother Ukraina is one and the same, so this connection between Ukraine personified as a young girl and Mother Earth being the same. And a consistent interest in the intercession of ancestors to come down from the heavens and protect the Ukrainian armed forces, to protect the civilians. This connection to the ancestor clan, the larger clan, is something that people really are finding to be an interesting source of creativity and of significance for them. Now, a lot of this is driven by the younger generation. Like I said, they're very keen to rediscover this ancient past. It seems very mystical and intriguing and juicy to them. But they are doing it in a way to kind of rediscover or discover their own sense of identity. What does it mean to be Ukrainian now? not that version that was kind of tainted from the Soviet period that my parents went through and that my grandparents lived through. What does it mean to be Ukrainian now? And how can we connect that to the very origins of our people? It's connection to the land in many cases, and that's not just because Ukraine's territory literally has been invaded, but it is connecting to these aspects of these early belief systems that honor and revere the world around you in a way that is special and different than what we've seen in recent decades. So, is the story of Ukraine's belief systems through time complicated, or is it rich? Well, at the end of the day, my argument is, it is what it is. I mean, we can feel offended that there was a point in time for many, 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 many years that Ukrainians were not Christian, and they still had really special, significant ways of expressing their belief systems. We can honor the fact that our people have been agricultural virtually from the very beginning and have had this most sacred relationship with the land. At the end of the day, what they practiced and what they believed cannot be changed. It's all a part of history, and we can pretend it didn't exist, or we can appreciate it for what it was and see how maybe some of it has trickled down to our time as well. For many people, this seemingly contradictory, these contradictory ways of believing, those pre-Christian traditions against what we learn in church and our Christian faith, seem to be contradictory, but for most people, honestly, they are not mutually exclusive. They kind of coexist and have blended into something that is likely a remnant of that religious dualism that they meant to be just a temporary thing. And we have people who do both seamlessly without even realizing that they may be shifting back and forth from the origins of one belief system to another. I will speak here very quickly about my two grandmothers, both the most pious religious Ukrainian women you will find, quintessential. One grandmother was a priest's wife, for God's sake. But yet, in the same breath, they were so superstitious, and they did things that seemed so out of character with that religious hat on their heads. But it all just was part of the Ukrainian character, and they honored the world around them. They were deeply connected to land and to nature through gardening, etc. And these are all those little kernels that have existed over time and that have lasted up until our day. Is it our place to judge what ancient peoples believed and how they understood the world? I don't think so. I think it can be complicated and rich at the same time. Those two things can both be true. And as my students will tell you, an exploration of most things Ukrainian includes the words complicated and rich. Certainly Ukrainian history falls under that category of complicated and rich. And I think it's just a wonderful place to discover and to try to make connections for yourself and to help understand both present-day Ukrainians and frankly Ukrainians around the world, because we see evidence of this wherever Ukrainians went in the world. So I thank you for your attention. I'm sorry I covered so much ground and I went a little bit over. Thank you so much.